The trial room was suffocating, not from the summer heat, but from the weight of collective fear and revulsion. The air seemed heavier, as if the room itself couldn't bear the presence of the accused. He sat motionless, his face obscured by the same mask he wore during his arrest. A blank white visage with hollow, black eyes. No expression, no humanity. He hadn't spoken since his capture, and his silence only deepened the terror. The story began innocuously enough, as modern horror often does, with technology. Reports of hacked devices, laptops activating their webcams without user input, phones sending text messages the owners swore they didn't type, emails sent to themselves containing cryptic messages like, "I'm watching," or "Don't look outside." It was unsettling, but not unheard of in the age of cybercrime. Authorities dismissed these as the work of opportunistic hackers. Then the murders began. The first known victim was Rachel Combs, a 34-year-old freelance writer from Seattle. Her body was discovered in her apartment by a concerned neighbor after Rachel failed to respond to calls for 3 days. Her death was not only brutal, but disturbingly theatrical. She was posed on her living room couch as if watching television, her face frozen in a grotesque grin that had been carved into her skin. What sent shivers through investigators was the laptop sitting open on the coffee table. The webcam was on, the green light blinking rhythmically, and a single line of text hovered on the screen. "You should have locked the door." Evidence showed that Rachel's laptop had been hacked days before her death. The killer had gained access to her webcam, monitoring her every move. Police speculated he had used her device's GPS to track her location and plan the attack. But there was more. On her desk was a Polaroid photo. It showed Rachel sleeping, clearly taken from the corner of her bedroom. The timestamp on the back confirmed the photo was taken 2 nights before her murder. She hadn't even known he was there. The mask left behind at the scene was unlike anything mass-produced. It was porcelain, painted with jagged crimson lines that seemed to mimic tears of blood. Witnesses described the mask as eerily lifelike, as though it were an extension of the killer's face. The second murder took place a week later, hundreds of miles away in Denver. A college student named Evan Michaels was found hanging from his bedroom ceiling. His hands and feet were bound, his face contorted in terror. Written in red lipstick on the wall were the words, "No safe place." His phone, discovered on the floor beneath him, showed a notification from his email. "Last seen near your location." This chilling message had been sent just moments before his death. Again, a mask was left at the scene, this time resembling a grinning jester. Police noted its unnerving detail. The paint seemed fresh, as though applied minutes before being discarded. For months, the killer evaded capture. His victims appeared random, different genders, races, ages, but they shared one chilling detail. Each victim had reported unusual activity on their devices before their deaths. This led to his chilling moniker, the Internet Mass Killer. The media frenzy was relentless. News outlets speculated endlessly about his methods, his motives, and his masks. Cybersecurity experts warned the public to secure their devices, but paranoia spread faster than information. People covered webcams with tape, abandoned social media accounts, and turned off location tracking on their phones. But the killer always seemed one step ahead. One of the most harrowing accounts came from a woman who narrowly escaped. Maria Lopez, a young nurse from Austin, noticed her phone behaving oddly. Random apps opened by themselves, and her front-facing camera would flash unexpectedly. Maria dismissed it as a glitch until the night she received a text message from her own number. The message read, "Look outside." Against her better judgment, Maria did. Standing across the street under a flickering street lamp was a figure. He wore a mask that resembled a cracked doll's face, its eyes impossibly large and empty. Maria froze, clutching her phone as the figure tilted his head unnaturally to one side, then raised a single hand in a mock wave. Maria screamed, bolted the door, and called 911. By the time police arrived, the figure was gone, But a Polaroid photo was taped to her window. It showed her asleep on her couch, taken just hours earlier. The message scrawled across the bottom read, "Next time." Maria's testimony in court was haunting. She recounted every detail, from the shadowy figure's eerie stillness to the sound of her own ragged breathing as she hid in her bathroom, waiting for sirens. Her escape was pure luck. Investigators later found footprints in the mud outside her home, leading away into the woods. The trial unearthed more horrors. Police presented evidence from the killer's confiscated devices. Hard drives contained thousands of hours of video footage. Ordinary people in their homes, utterly unaware they were being watched. Victims cooking dinner, brushing their teeth, scrolling through their phones. The footage was meticulously cataloged by date and location. It was an unnerving mosaic of stolen lives. Witness after witness took the stand, recounting their brushes with the killer. A man described waking to find his computer displaying a live feed of his own bedroom. A teenager testified that her phone played distorted nursery rhymes in the middle of the night, accompanied by an image of her front porch. Each story painted a picture of a predator who thrived on fear, whose very presence warped reality into something nightmarish. Then there was the mask collection. Police discovered over 30 masks in a hidden compartment in the killer's rented storage unit. Each was handcrafted, grotesquely detailed, and unique. Experts testified that the masks seemed imbued with a level of craftsmanship that suggested obsession. Each murder scene had been paired with a specific mask, as though it symbolized a ritual only the killer understood. The courtroom heard recordings recovered from the killer's phone. Distorted whispers, overlapping voices, and the sound of breathing in complete darkness. One recording played aloud sent shivers through everyone present. It was a victim's voice, pleading for their life, followed by the killer's reply, "You were already chosen." What truly confounded investigators and haunted the public were the seemingly paranormal elements of the case. Victims often reported strange occurrences leading up to their murders. Electronics behaving erratically, objects moving on their own, shadows that didn't match their source. Skeptics dismissed these as coincidences or the effects of heightened paranoia. But for those who lived through the ordeal, the supernatural seemed an undeniable part of the killer's methods. One detective who worked the case described an inexplicable moment during a search of the killer's hideout. As officers cataloged evidence, the overhead lights flickered and went out. In the darkness, several officers swore they heard a low, guttural laugh that echoed through the room. The lights returned moments later, but nothing could explain the sound. The prosecution painted the killer as a master manipulator, someone who exploited modern technology to its fullest extent, warping it into a tool of terror. The defense, however, took a bizarre turn. They claimed the masks were not mere disguises, but conduits for an otherworldly force. They argued the killer was a puppet, controlled by something far darker than human comprehension. This defense was largely dismissed, but it left a lingering unease. As the trial concluded, the killer remained silent. He never removed his mask, never spoke a word. When the guilty verdict was announced, a wave of relief washed over the courtroom. But as the killer was escorted away, he turned his masked face toward the gallery. For a brief, chilling moment, those hollow eyes seemed to meet every person's gaze, and a faint, distorted sound echoed through the room. Some swore it was laughter. Others believed it was the sound of a camera shutter. After the trial, the questions didn't end. They only grew darker. Investigators began re-examining old cases that bore similarities to the internet mass killer's methods. Cold cases where victims had reported strange digital phenomena before their deaths were suddenly reopened. A young woman in Michigan found dead in 2018, her body discovered beneath a blood-red tarp with a clown mask nearby. A retired teacher in Florida, murdered in her home, with her security cameras showing nothing but static for 3 hours before her death. All the cases had one thread in common: the presence of a mask, always unique, always grotesque. The idea that these murders stretched back years, possibly decades, sent chills down the spines of investigators. Could he have been active far longer than anyone suspected, or worse, was there more than one? For the families of the victims, closure remained elusive. Rachel Combs' sister, Emily, gave a tearful interview months after the trial. She spoke of sleepless nights plagued by visions of Rachel's hollow grin, frozen forever in fear. Evan Michael's father sat silently through his interview, clutching a picture of his son, unable to speak. Maria Lopez, the nurse who narrowly escaped, refused all public appearances. Friends said she became a recluse, taping her windows and refusing to own any digital devices. The masks themselves took on an almost mythical status. They were stored as evidence, locked away in a high-security facility, but rumors spread that they weren't entirely inert. Staff members reported strange sensations when near them: unease, headaches, even fleeting whispers that seemed to emanate from the masks themselves. One officer claimed that the masks felt alive, though his statement was quickly dismissed as stress-induced paranoia. And then there was the final recording. Found on one of the killer's devices after his conviction, it became the most debated piece of evidence in the entire case. The audio file began with static, then a faint voice whispered a single phrase: "Are you watching?" What followed was 20 minutes of distorted noise, punctuated by faint cries, laughter, and what sounded like scraping metal. Experts analyzed the file for weeks, but its origin and purpose remained a mystery. The public's obsession with the case didn't fade. Online forums dissected every detail, with amateur sleuths piecing together timelines and speculating about motives. Some claimed the masks were cursed, each imbued with the essence of the victim it was associated with. Others believed the killer was part of a larger cult, his actions merely a prelude to something far worse. A few insisted he wasn't human at all, that the masks were his true face, changing shape to reflect his victims' fears. The courtroom where the trial took place became a site of macabre fascination. Tourists visited in hopes of feeling the dark energy left behind. A local journalist reported seeing a masked figure in the parking lot late one night, though no evidence supported her claim. Stories of haunted electronics became more frequent, with people reporting strange messages and ghostly faces appearing on their screens. Most were dismissed as hoaxes, but the fear was real. The killer's silence also left an indelible mark. Psychologists speculated endlessly about his psyche, but without his voice, their theories felt hollow. Why had he chosen his victims? Was it random, or was there a pattern too subtle to see? Was he driven by hatred, by obsession, or by something unknowable? His refusal to speak robbed the world of answers, leaving only the masks and the terror they represented. Even his death brought no peace. A year after his conviction, the internet mass killer was found dead in his cell. The guards described his body as twisted, his limbs contorted in unnatural angles. His mask was still on, though no one could explain how it had returned to him. The autopsy revealed no clear cause of death. The final line of the coroner's report was hauntingly simple: death by unknown means. The killer's passing didn't end the murders. Reports of hacked devices and strange figures in masks continued to surface. In rural Ohio, a family of 4 disappeared without a trace, their home left undisturbed except for a single mask on the dining room table. In Japan, a series of mysterious deaths were linked to a figure wearing a fox mask, captured briefly on a security camera before vanishing into thin air. Some believed it was a copycat inspired by the legend. Others whispered that the internet mask killer's spirit lived on, using his masks as vessels to continue his work. But the truth, like so much about this case, remained shrouded in darkness. Years later, when the story was retold, it was less about the killer, and more about what he represented. The fragility of safety in an interconnected world, the terror of being watched, and the haunting realization that sometimes evil doesn't need a reason. It only needs an opportunity.